CEO Ethan's Guide to Begging His Ex-Wife Back, the slow burn of regret 1. The return of the first. For 3 years Serena had played the perfect trophy wife, waiting on Ethan hand and foot. The day his delicate first love flew home, he tossed the divorce papers at her. Her heart is weak, be decent and step aside. Serena signed with a smile and vanished that same night. Later, Ethan turned the city upside down and discovered she was the long-lost granddaughter of capital's richest dynasty. At the charity auction she glided in on the arm of a new man and, using the very tactics he had taught her, crushed every last shard of his pride. Eyes red, he knelt in the rain. Serena, I was wrong, she laughed behind the window. Sterling, kneel somewhere else, don't stain my steps. 2. The divorce. Ethan had flung the papers onto the coffee table as if they were scrap, a smear of blue ink from the document he'd just signed clinging to the edge, careless, casual, contemptuous. Sign them. He didn't even lift his gaze from the phone in his hand, perhaps rereading Lydia's latest message about how frail she felt. Lydia's back. Her heart can't take stress. Be sensible and give her room. The living room was huge, the crystal chandelier raining light that couldn't pierce the last faint glimmer in Serena's eyes. She still wore the plain apron, fresh from the kitchen, fingers still warm and faintly scented with steam and wok oil because she had been cooking the dinner he liked. 3 years. Over 1,000 dawns and dusks. She had tended this strategic marriage like the most devout believer, secretly nursing a ridiculous hope. She knew his picky stomach, his every habit, kept the vast penthouse immaculate, even stumbled through preparing sober-up broth when he came home late reeking of brandy. All of it, it seemed, was worth only a dismissive be sensible and give her room once the rightful woman returned. Serena stared at the agreement, then at Ethan. He was still maddeningly handsome, deep-set eyes, straight nose, thin lips that could always freeze her with a single sentence. She laughed softly, a feather skimming a still lake, and the sound finally made him frown and look up. All right. Only that one word. No tantrum, no interrogation, no bitterness, no ripple at all. She undid the apron, folded it, set it aside, walked to the table, lifted the pen. The nib whispered over the page. Serena, fluid, decisive, the handwriting he had never seen carry such finality. A flicker of irritation spasmed through him, too fast to catch. He almost spoke, about the settlement, but she was already straightening, gaze sweeping past him, empty, as though he were a stranger. I never kept much, it's packed. The rest, handle however you like. She turned toward the foyer where a small suitcase waited, apparently ready long ago. The door clicked shut. Only then did he come to. The penthouse was hollow, the air still carrying the faint fragrance he had never noticed until this moment, and it seemed to make the rooms unbearably vast. He crushed the strange pang, lifted his phone, dialed Lydia, voice gentler than he knew it could be. Lydia, it's done. What would you like for dinner? I'll have. He stalled. Have who prepare it? For 3 years Serena had wordlessly overseen every bite he took. 3. Crushing him at the auction. Serena had disappeared, utterly. At first Ethan dismissed it. A woman tethered to the Vance family, meek, bland, where could she go? A tantrum, he assumed, a gimmick to make him chase her. He sneered and devoted himself to newly returned, fragile, Lydia. But one day, 2, a week, her number was dead. When he called the Vance estate for business, they were courteously cool. Vance has her own plans, no need for Sterling's concern. His investigators came back empty-handed. She had evaporated, noiseless. His irritation snowballed. He began to sleep badly. Each midnight return to the frigid penthouse made him glance toward the foyer, the kitchen. No way. Prom-clad figure would ever again ask softly whether he'd eaten. Lydia remained delicately dependent, craving his company, his reassurance. Yet sometimes, staring at her artfully touched-up brows, he drifted. Serena had never demanded a thing, had only soundlessly offered a perfectly warmed cup of tea when work frustrated him. Ethan, do you like this necklace? Lydia cuddled close, jewelry catalog open. He glanced at the blazing diamonds and saw instead Serena's bare ring finger. In 3 years he had never given her a single piece of decent jewelry, unnecessary, and, she never asked. A thin, delayed sting began gnawing inside his chest. A month later, the city's grandest charity auction drew every elite name. Ethan arrived with Lydia radiant on his arm, exchanging pleasantries, projecting invincibility. Lydia clung to him, glowing under the polite, or sham, compliments. Then the ballroom doors opened again, spotlights swung instinctively. The hall fell silent for a beat. A woman stepped in. Emerald velvet gown skimming every curve, nothing like the beige homebody he remembered. A diamond necklace, simple, astronomical, flashed at her throat. What stunned people more was her aura, unhurried, self-possessed, a careless sharpness glittering in her eyes. Serena. But not the Serena he knew. Beside her stood a tall, quiet man whose gentle smile could not hide its edge. When he bent to speak to her, his admiration and protectiveness were obvious. "That's Julian, heir to the Shaw banking empire," someone gasped. "Who's the woman?" "Good Lord, that's the granddaughter General just brought home, the lost heiress." Ripples of chatter spread. Ethan froze, his blood turned to sludge. That dazzling figure, Capital's newly minted heiress, the woman now showered with awe, was the same he had tossed away like trash? Impossible. Lydia's face drained of color, her nails dug into his arm. Ethan, how could she? Feeling the weight of their stare, Serena glanced over. Her gaze met Ethan's for 1 second, flat, detached, no hatred, no ache, not even recognition. She looked away, murmured something to Julian, and moved to their table. That single glance cut deeper than any glare of hatred. It left Ethan feeling a cold, bone-deep humiliation. The humiliation escalated into public disgrace the moment the charity auction began. Ethan's target tonight was the prime development parcel on the east side of town. Sterling had been preparing for months. This parcel was meant to be theirs. When the bidding opened, he raised his paddle with practiced calm. A soft, clear female voice followed instantly, each bid only the minimum increment above his, the rhythm flawless. It was Serena. She never even looked back, only lifted her paddle with languid grace, murmuring to Julian as though the whole thing were a harmless parlor game. Beads of sweat gathered at Ethan's temples. Serena's bidding was surgical, predatory, a cat toying with a mouse. She had his jugular pinned beneath her claw. Every raise he made felt pre-calculated, as though she could read his next move. The tactic felt uncannily familiar, a mirror of the very plays he'd once used to gut rivals in the market. She was wielding the lessons he'd taught her, against him. Flash fuzzy memories stuttered through his mind, married life, her curious questions about business, a night when his mood had been good and he'd tossed her a few casual pointers. The price climbed far past Sterling's ceiling. Every head in the ballroom swiveled between Ethan and Serena, eyes bright with curiosity, relish, and barely hidden schadenfreude. Ethan clenched his jaw and thrust his paddle up, throwing out a reckless, all-in figure. A hush rippled across the room. Serena lowered her paddle, turned her head, and through the crowd sent him the faintest of smiles, thin, glittering, sufficient to freeze his blood. In that smile lived open derision and absolute, crushing victory. The gavel fell. The parcel was logged to an investment vehicle Held by Julian, and everyone in the room knew whose hand had truly guided the knife. Ethan had lost not only the parcel he deemed his, but every shred of pride and dignity before Riverdale's entire elite, castrated by the wife he himself had discarded. He could almost hear the silent laughter, could see the ashen disbelief on Lydia's face. He remained in his seat, feeling the slow roast of a bonfire built from his own arrogance, each second an eternity of scalding shame. For kneeling in the rain when the auction ended, a cloudburst had arrived without warning. Thunder rolled like a funeral drum over the city. Ethan shook off Lydia's reaching hand and stumbled into the deluge, a man hollowed of soul. Rain soaked him in an instant, his bespoke suit glued to his skin, colder than any winter, yet trivial beside the frost inside his chest. He knew where Serena was living now, the west side enclave of Willowmere, the mansion General had given his newly acknowledged granddaughter. He drove as though demons snapped at his wheels, engine howling through the storm, yet nothing could drown out the echo of her detached glance or that triumphant smile. The car slewed to a stop outside wrought iron gates. He lurched out, falling against the bars. Cold rain sluiced down his hair, his cheeks, blurring everything. Serena! Serena, come out! He slammed his palms against the metal, voice cracking beneath the thunder. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Serena, do you hear me? Upstairs, a curtain twitched aside. Warm lamplight spilled through the narrow gap, framing Serena in soft profile. She had changed into loungewear and held a steaming mug of milk. Gazing down, her face was a blank canvas, no elation, no pity. Ethan saw the window, saw her. Desperate, he dropped to his knees in the puddled gravel with a splash muffled by wind and rain. Serena! I was blind, I was a bastard. Head tilted to the sky, he no longer tried to separate tears from rain, his voice stripped to raw pleading. Forgive me, just one more chance, please. Serena watched the rainwater erode his pride, watched the man who had once dictated her every emotion crawl like a stray dog at her feet. She remembered nights spent waiting alone, the divorce papers tossed aside, the cold command to be reasonable and make way for someone else. Slowly, she pushed the window wider. Rain and Ethan's ragged sobs flooded in. Hope flared in his eyes. He tried to crawl closer. Then her voice drifted down, distinct, laced with languid contempt, as though she were brushing off something filthy. "Sterling," she said, the lamplight polishing her calm profile, "kneel farther away." A pause. "Don't soil my doorstep." She slid the window shut and drew the curtains, blotting out the light. Only the boundless, icy rain remained, and the man whose creed and vanity had crumbled into the mud. The rain intensified. The soft click of the latch, muffled by downpour, detonated inside Ethan's skull like thunder, scattering what was left of his soul. That single panel of glass now barred every hope he had imagined might crack her wall of ice. She wanted him farther away. He was filth. Needles of rain bit through his soaked skin, but the chill was nothing compared to the contempt that had carved his heart hollow. He stayed on his knees, spine evaporating, folding into the puddled gravel until his forehead met the cold ground. Filthy water lapped at his cheeks. He no longer sensed grime, he was grime, the stain left by every cruel dismissal he had dealt her during 3 years of marriage. A low, broken laugh rattled out of his throat, half swallowed by rain, more desolate than any sob. Wrong? One featherlight word against the weight of every sleepless night she had spent alone? Against the frozen tone she used now to exile him beyond her gate? No. Far from enough. The warm glow upstairs continued, light he had extinguished for himself, a shore he would never reach again. Time trickled past, the storm slackened into a steady drizzle. At last Ethan dragged himself upright, joints trembling, designer suit plastered with muck. He did not look back, only stumbled to his car, step by sodden step. Engine snarling, headlights sliced the wet dark as he fled the monument to his humiliation. 5 wore in the boardroom. The days that followed reshaped Ethan into someone unrecognizable. He stopped trying to reach Serena and stopped showing up in any place she might appear. He buried himself completely in work, throwing himself in with a self-punishing intensity. Everyone at Sterling felt the crushing pressure and unprecedented severity radiating from the CEO. Projects shot forward at a terrifying speed, but no one felt safe. Only he knew that this manic pace was the only way to escape, if only for a moment, the regret and pain gnawing at him every second. The instant he paused, Serena's face, cool and mocking at the charity auction, her eyes, dripping with loathing through the rain-streaked window, would materialize and flay him alive, over and over again. He began to lose sleep, leaning on alcohol, yet in the haze of drunkenness he still saw the obedient figure tying her apron, bustling about the kitchen, heard her gentle voice asking, "You're home, have you eaten?" When he woke, only deeper emptiness and sharper pain remained. He yanked every resource he had planned to funnel toward Lydia and her family. When Lydia came to him in tears, playing her usual role of fragile innocence, he stared at her with no expression. For the first time he realized that the tears that once stirred pity now looked absurd and irritating. "Hawthorne," he cut her off, voice hard as flint, "this ends here. The help I gave before can be considered compensation for some past misjudgments." "Ethan, how can you do this to me? Is it because of that bitch Serena? She's climbed the big branch now and thinks she's too good for you. Shut up." Ethan barked, eyes razor sharp, the single shout freezing Lydia mid-sentence, her ace bloodless. "Don't let me hear you slander her again. Now leave." Terrified by the icy menace she had never seen in him, Lydia slunk away. Silence settled again in the office. Ethan sagged against the chair back, fingers pressed to his throbbing temples. Compensation? The debt he owed Serena could never be repaid by something so trivial. He remembered the ruthless precision she had used against him at the auction, moves that carried the unmistakable stamp of the style he had once prided himself on. Back when they first married, she had shown a casual interest in business, sometimes asking naive questions while flipping through financial magazines. When he was in a good mood he had tossed off a few pointers. He had assumed she was making conversation or angling for praise. He never imagined she had actually listened, learned, and then deployed it on the battlefield he valued most, striking the deadliest blow. Irony didn't begin to cover it. Meanwhile, Serena's life looked nothing like his. After being acknowledged by the Vance family, she did not lounge beneath the title of richest dynasty's granddaughter. Leveraging Vance connections and the toughness honed by hardship, she stepped straight into the group's core circle. With Julian's steady guidance, she learned fast. She was no longer the woman who studied faces or tiptoed around a hollow strategic marriage. She was Serena, a possible future heir. Calm, decisive, she displayed startling talent and nerve in the boardroom, merging with the razor-edged image she had unveiled at the auction. News of Ethan drifted to her now and then, his work obsessions, his cold shoulder to Lydia, his obvious misery. It stirred nothing. Hate? Maybe once, when she signed the divorce papers, in the nights she licked her wounds. Not anymore. Hatred is still a passion, and Ethan no longer rated a single emotion from her. He was merely evidence of a mistake, a piece of discarded clutter waiting to be cleared away. Today the crossboard tech venture she was leading entered its decisive negotiation round. Coincidentally, Sterling was a powerful bidder as well. On briefing day Ethan arrived early, groomed to mask his exhaustion, but the crimson in his eyes and the faint hollows beneath them betrayed him. The moment he stepped into the conference room he faltered. There she sat at the head, crisp suit, murmuring final instructions to an aide. She did not even lift her eyes. When the session opened Serena chaired for Vance, logic flawless, diction exact, grasp of the project deeper than half the veterans present. She borrowed no one's spotlight, she was the light. When Sterling's turn came Ethan took the floor himself. He fought to focus, unveiling the polished pitch, yet every second he felt Serena's gaze brush across him, stripped of anything personal, a purely analytical evaluation of a rival. That clinical detachment, void of history, sliced deeper than contempt. During QA Serena posed several questions, each sliding the scalpel into the weakest, most opportunistic seams of Sterling's plan. Her tone stayed mild, but every word dissected a flaw they had hoped to hide. Ethan's team began to sweat, stammering, unable to give convincing answers. Standing at the podium, Ethan felt his heart spasm. The Serena he had known was truly dead, killed the afternoon he served her the divorce papers. The woman before him, powerful, icy, was his greatest creation and his most complete punishment. He opened his mouth to defend, but language failed against facts and her all-seeing gaze. Sterling's presentation ended in disarray. Delegates filed out afterward. Ethan remained, watching Serena move toward the exit encircled by colleagues. Sir, the name scraped out of him, hoarse. She didn't break stride. As she passed she merely tilted her head, eyes blank, distant, like someone appraising unused furniture, then left beside Julian without the slightest pause. Ethan stood rooted, the room's bustle fading until only that last look remained, branding his retinas. She would not even gift him her hatred. He had lost the bid, lost his pride, and, 3 years ago, lost the woman who once carried his whole world in her eyes. A defeat he engineered himself, with no court of appeal, no hope of reversal. Remorse rose like a rogue wave and swallowed him whole. He understood that for the rest of his life he would burn in the knowledge of losing her, an ache that would grant him no peace. Sterling's stock price slid in response, and several previously wavering partners started humming the same evasive tune. Ethan locked himself in his office, staring at mountain-high folders and the ceaseless blink of crisis alerts, and for the first time felt the marrow drain from his bones. It wasn't a question of competence, his fighting spirit had scattered. The core that had kept him charging across battlefields of mahogany and glass seemed to have been vacuumed out the instant Serena delivered that final glance. He began to dream, night after night. No longer did he see Serena's meek silhouette moving between the refrigerator and the copper pans. Instead he tasted the mockery curving her mouth at the charity auction, felt the slam of the window she sealed against the rain, froze beneath the clinical sweep of her eyes across the boardroom table. He would jerk awake slick with sweat, his heart clenched by an invisible fist, remorse circling like fog until he couldn't breathe. He started haunting the places she might appear, if only for a glimpse from a safe distance. But Serena's schedule had gone underground, aides in dark suits flanked her comings and goings, and she had vanished from every map he knew. All that remained on the corporate topography was the spreading shadow of Vance, the Titan steadily grinding Sterling's breathing room to dust. One midnight, he almost unconsciously steered the car back to the tower that had housed their 3-year marriage. He craned his head, the windows were black. New owners had long since replaced her scented candles with strangers' potted ferns, ordinary family life glowing where his had cooled. He sat in the car, chain-smoking until the horizon blushed, then drove off numb. Nowhere felt like home. 6 A future in stars. Meanwhile, Serena's days ran smooth and plentiful. She had settled into the role of general's granddaughter, yet she refused to nest in the family canopy. Armed with the muscle she had displayed in her first blockbuster deal, she carved out her own territory inside Vance, inheriting ever weightier mandates. She studied, she expanded, channeling every ounce of claustrophobia from those 3 years trapped behind apron strings into forward velocity. Julian remained within arm's reach, never closer than courtesy allowed, never farther than genuine care required. He admired her steel wit as much as her balance sheets, honoring her need for clock and calendar before any talk of heart. Their bond was a sturdy alliance built on mutual regard and mutually beneficial numbers, warmed by friendship that might, at some later hour, decide to become more. Serena knew exactly what she needed now, not a scalding new romance, but bedrock on which to stand while she finished becoming herself. News of Ethan still reached her, filed by an assistant along with the morning brief. She heard Sterling's pain, heard he could not seem to rise. No satisfaction spiked her pulse, the sweetness of revenge had peaked the night of the auction, then dissolved. Each subsequent victory felt like checking off items on a list. Whether Ethan bled or merely limped was irrelevant. Her map now carried different coordinates, newer peaks to summit, that mistaken marriage, and the man who had signed it, were smudges on the rear horizon, indistinguishable from road grime. Tonight she attended a top-tier industry gala, one of many invitations that now littered her calendar. She wore midnight blue silk cut so sharply it could have done the negotiating itsy. LF. Between crystal chandeliers she traded insights with titans of 3 continents, smile polished, subtext razor ready. Ethan came as well, propelled by dire necessity. Sterling needed oxygen, and hiding purchased none. He skirted the perimeter of Serena's constellation, lingering near the fringes with a flute of champagne he never tasted, gaze disobeying him, flicking toward that blade of blue again and again. The woman there blazed, poised, fearless. Memory tried to superimpose an aproned figure whose eyes once begged for scraps of approval, and the overlap would not hold. He had sanded away those nascent sparks, told himself they were tricks of neon. Then he had shoved her into the furnace that forged her present armor. Regret, self-loathing, and despair braided into a rope and cinched tight around his throat. Mid-gala, Serena tired. She murmured her excuses to the host, then left early with Julian at her elbow. Ethan watched the door sigh shut behind her. Some compulsion jerked him forward, he followed. Outside, the night air carried the chill of early fall. Julian's car idled at the curb, and he opened the rear door with instinctive grace. Ethan's courage surged from nowhere. He strode forward, voice gravel rough, "Serena." She paused, half inside the car, then turned. Julian's brow creased, he stepped slightly ahead of her, calm but unmistakably shielding, his gaze pinning Ethan. "Sterling, is there something?" Serena asked, tone light, pleasant, the way she might address a middling supplier. The address, Sterling, nodded every rehearsed plea inside his throat. He stared into her eyes, a depth without tide, no trace of the man once named Ethan disturbing the water. 1,000 sentences collapsed into 2 trembling words, "I'm sorry." She studied him for several beats. No mockery, no anger, not even irritation, only the detached curiosity one gives a stranger asking for directions. At last she gave the tiniest shake of her head, voice clear in the lamplight, "Then, it's over." She lowered herself into the car. Julian shut the door, met Ethan's stunned stare with a flicker of pity, then circled to the opposite side. The black sedan merged into traffic, swallowed by neon rivers. Ethan remained on the pavement, wind musing his hair. "It's over" carried a finality sharper than every accusation she might have hurled. It meant she had truly let go. It meant his agony and apology were white noise in her orbit. It meant he no longer even raided a corner of resentment inside her heart. He stood as if the universe had erased his coordinates. Scenes assaulted him, tenderness he had dismissed, devotion he had rebranded as routine, a heart he had tossed aside like a spent contract. All rose now as blades slicing inward, slow and meticulous. He understood, he had lost her forever. Not the day he signed the divorce papers, long before, each time he answered warmth with indifference, every moment he ground her sincerity beneath his heel, he had scripted this ending. The emotional reckoning had raised more than pride, it had incinerated every future they might have authored, turning the pages to ash that would sting his eyes for the rest of his life. He would live among those cinders, breathing them, tasting them, until the last clock stopped. And Serena, her future written in stars, would travel on, Ethan's name just darkness between constellations.